Hello everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. The Board of Education has already met in executive session and we saluted the flag while we were there. So at this point we're going to start our regular session. To start, I will do the statement of public notice, or do I have to do the roll call first? Okay, roll call first, right?
Mr. Salmon? Here. Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Ms. Singh?
Here.
Ms. Light?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Sorry, I think Ms. White said
I
here
said
for Ms.
here.
Light.
Oh, sorry.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mr. Khan?
Here.
Ms. Hira?
Here.
Mr. Markarian? Here. Mr. Syatt? Here. Ms. Fox?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you. I'm going to read the statement of public notice. I have to put my glasses on. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. Notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with Public Law 1975, Chapter 231A. Due to the pandemic, the Board of Education expects that in-person attendees to this meeting have completed and passed a self-assessment of personal health, wear a face covering pursuant to the Executive Order 251, sit in a socially distanced manner for members of different households, and maintain social distancing if waiting in line to make a public comment. For those members of the public who are unable to attend our meeting in person, there are 2 live stream links of the meeting posted through the district website, bernardsboe.com. 2 live stream links are both airing during the meeting. Each is just simply a backup of the other. We very much welcome public input at our meetings. There are 2 times during regular meetings that the public is invited to speak. One time is early in the meeting before the board votes, when you may speak about any item that is listed on tonight's agenda. Towards the end of the meeting, there is another public forum to address any matter of public concern related to the schools. When you approach the microphone, please state your name and address. Each statement by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once during a given public comment session. In order to run efficient meetings and to allow maximum opportunity for members to speak of the public, the board reserves the right to set a different time limit if necessary. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No participant may address or question board members individually. As a courtesy to those individuals unable to attend our meetings in person, public comment may be made remotely through Zoom. Interested individuals should go to the district webpage, bernardsboe.com, and select Board of Education, followed by public comment to get the specific instructions. And there's a link in the agenda here also. Public comments made in person will be processed first, and then the comments via Zoom. No public comments will be accepted before 7 p.m. or after the last item on the agenda, board forum. Please understand that public comment portions of our agenda are not structured as question and answer sessions, but are rather opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board may or may not respond to public comments. Any board responses to public comments will generally be addressed during board forum or during committee reports. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when speaking. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students or employees. Please also understand that the board will not be responsible for the content of comments made by members of the public. Members of the public are cautioned that they are speaking at their own risk, and any personally directed statements they may make subject them to legal liability to the affected individual. If it is necessary for the board to go into executive session at the end of the meeting, we would provide an estimated time of length for the session and whether any action is anticipated to be taken upon returning to public session. So that's the statement of public notice. We have a student representative, but I think he's out with the student government because we just met with the entire student government to hear their comments and questions and hear how the school year is going for them. So he is probably still out in his meeting with them. So I will go through the agenda. If he comes back, we can go back to his item. Does that make sense? Okay. So I just wanted to make a couple comments before we start the rest of the meeting and begin our presentation about the local assessment data. I know a number of people, that's an understatement, have been emailing us today after the governor's announcement about lifting the mask mandate. And I just wanted to tell everyone, which we already told the student government, that it was always in our plan that we submitted for our federal emergency money. The language that we wrote was that as soon as it is allowable, then masks will be optional. So now the governor is making it allowable. So as of March 7th, the governor says that the mask mandate will be lifted, and therefore masks will be optional. There will be a few caveats which we don't have the exact details of. For example, if you just had COVID and you're coming back on day 6, things like that where it makes sense that a person would wear a mask, and we have to work out the details of that. We're waiting to see if the state updates its guidance for those types of situations, but in the meantime, for everybody else who is not at any more risk than normal of having COVID, masks will be optional. We spoke with the student government. I know, I think the governor even said in his remarks today, you know, some parents are very concerned, and people are concerned about, you know, masks being optional, and also about the potential for peer pressure and or people not being nice to people who are still wearing their masks. And so the student government students reassured us that that would not happen in our schools, and that everyone will be respectful of each other. So we believe them, and we're, you know, very happy that everyone's going to support each other and get through this the best that they can. One other thing I just wanted to say, because we've gotten some questions about it also, is the doctor's note for going back to school for PE and sports after you have COVID. We've come up with a form that parents can fill out if they are going to bring their child back without getting the doctor's clearance, that acknowledges you understand the, you know, potential severity of COVID, and that you've consulted with your doctor if necessary about your child and their ability to come back to school, but you do not have to produce the doctor's note if you sign off on the form. And any other details will have to be discussed. We had a policy committee meeting today where some of the speculation about how we will handle, you know, the particular cases of people who just had COVID or close contacts, we're really waiting on guidance from the state to make sure that whatever we come up with is appropriate. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's it, and we're going to switch over to our presentation. So the board is going to go sit down below for the presentation.
Hello?
Sorry. I can probably stand back here. All right, to try to wear my glasses without fogging up, it's going to be a trick. Good evening. It's good to see you all in person. I think it's the first time I've presented in person in 2 years. It's crazy. But I'm here for our annual state assessment report, normally given in October. So we're kind of delayed based on the way the testing schedule went. I just want to let everybody know, if you're watching at home or here, this will be posted to the district website in the morning.
Maybe Gordon could share his report.
That would be wonderful.
Would that be great? Do you want to share your report?
You want to come right up here?
Sure.
That would be great, Gordon.
I'm just wondering, because I am...
How flexible and...
No, we want you to be able to do it. Very sorry. I'm very sorry for interrupting.
I might try to get this instead of falling off. Jeez. Go ahead, Gordon.
Well, thank you so much, Ms.
Don't
Fox.
hold me away too much.
I'll try and make this as brief as possible,
Okay.
and I'll
Take your
hand
time.
it back to you. Thank you. All right, well, good evening, everyone. It's very nice to be sitting down here today, or standing, I should say. As Ridge enters our second semester, everyone obviously has new experiences lined up, and we're all having new things to look forward to. For example, underclassmen are beginning to finally think about classes for next year, believe it or not, already. It's kind of hard to believe we still have 2 marking periods left, but here we are. And juniors are starting to consider their colleges, starting to look at the applications, discussing those plans with their counselors. And seniors are eagerly awaiting to hear back from these colleges and making additional future plans. Ridge is also very excited to announce the new late in, early out program for upperclassmen, beginning next week. For the first time, we are actually allowing juniors to do this in addition to seniors, in the hopes that this will alleviate some of the traffic and COVID issues or concerns, I should say, that we have been experiencing. We hope that this will give students greater flexibility and alleviate some of the academic stress that is often associated with 3rd and 4th marking period. Ridge students, like I said, are looking forward to next year's classes. The programs of studies presentations hosted by our guidance counselors happen on February 1st. We thank our guidance team for providing these excellent academic resources throughout our high school careers, because without them, high school would be much, much more confusing. Regarding student activities, the Ridge swim team has once again dominated the local circuit, winning 6 titles at the Somerset County Championship meet. The forensics team won first place at the 4th Newark Catholic Forensics League Invitational of the year, and we had champions, as usual, in multiple categories. The Ridge bands also hosted the William Manning 8th graders in a showcase concert on January 25th, performing a diverse selection of music. As always, we congratulate everyone for their hard work, and we're very happy to be able to both compete and support other schools in our surrounding area, both within our district and just outside. Finally, the Ridge student government would like to extend a sincere thank you to all of the board members for today's meeting, as well as to the staff, advisors, and administration who helped to facilitate this event. We found the discussion to be very, very informative and productive, and we hope that you feel the same way. We look forward to continued communication and hope that we can all work together again in the future. Thank you. And now, Mrs. Fox, I apologize, but you have the podium once again.
Did everyone get one? Okay. Thanks, Gordon. Okay. So, I am here to, like I said, this will be posted on the district website tomorrow. I think that's where I left off. So you can get the full PowerPoint and review it, in more detail starting tomorrow morning. So tonight I'm going to review our most recent state and local assessment data. I will discuss our areas of strength as well as areas in need of support based upon our analysis of this data. Finally, I will go over information about our state assessment schedule this spring, as there have been some new information shared that is worthy of reviewing tonight. I'd like to give some credit to our curriculum supervisors, the math supervisor, Mr. Colmer, the ELA supervisor, Mr. Huncher, the science supervisor, Mr. Miziak, for their hard work, their analysis of this data with me, and their timeliness in getting this information to the teachers to make it the most useful for them earlier this year. Equally importantly, I'd like to really commend the staff, all the teachers and the support staff who've worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic. The results on these assessments are a testament to that hard work. We know we still have to focus on helping students through the pandemic, and especially those who are still struggling. But as you will see, our students fared very well relative to some of the national trends you may have seen discussed recently. So this presentation meets the state requirement to report out on the most recent state assessment results. Due to the pandemic, the last time students in this district and anywhere in the state took the NJSLA, the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, was in the spring of 2019. In the spring of 2020, that assessment was completely canceled. But in the spring of 2021, the assessment wasn't canceled. Rather, the federal government allowed states to delay testing until the fall. The Start Strong assessments that were administered in the fall of 2021 were given in lieu of the spring 2021 NJSLA. As I said, Start Strong was administered in the fall of 2021 in lieu of the NJSLA in the spring of 2021. This met the federal requirement for assessing ELA, math, and science for the school year 2020-21 only. The assessment was administered as a formative assessment, intended to provide educators with information about student learning in order to help teachers and districts meet the needs of the students. Start Strong was not intended to replace any local assessments or spring 2022 NJSLA. So the tests were created using a subset of the prior year standards. For example, the fifth grade Start Strong assessment was aligned to a subset of the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment or standards for grade 4 in ELA. And in fact, they were the prioritized standards from the previous grade level. The alignment is a bit more complicated in mathematics. The Algebra 1 Start Strong assessment is aligned to the grade 8 learning standards that are relevant to algebraic concepts. In an upcoming slide, I will show you the alignment of each test. So Start Strong assessments were much shorter than the NJSLA at 45 to 60 minutes, and they included only multiple choice questions, which allowed the state to get feedback to teachers almost immediately. With the release of the Start Strong assessment results, the New Jersey Department of Education provided districts with guidance about how to both interpret the results and about how to properly communicate the assessment results to the public. The impact of learning and testing conditions throughout the pandemic must be considered. In fact, the state doesn't recommend making any comparisons at all to state assessment results for that reason. The design of the assessment and the content they covered are such that the NJDOE warns that inferences cannot be made about student proficiency based upon these results, at least not all by itself. I have linked here the presentation made by the NJDOE reviewing all of the results across New Jersey. The data provided by Start Strong can be used by us, and this is how we are choosing to use it, to consider adjustments to the scope and sequence of content and the potential need to revisit prerequisite concepts or skills at specific grade levels. It can be used to determine professional development needs depending on where we see a need for additional support. And the individual student reports, which I'll show you later, can be used for conversations between teachers and parents about what the results say about their child's needs. So this is the chart that shows you what content each assessment was aligned to. For most grades, the test was aligned to the content of the prior years, like I explained about grade 5 ELA. However, what I want to explain is Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry. Students taking Algebra and Geometry took an assessment aligned to the grade 8 standards, no matter what grade they were taking Algebra or Geometry in, with a focus on Algebra or Geometry depending on the test. So they pulled the relevant standards and tests from the NJSLA related to Algebra for the Algebra 1 assessment or Geometry for the Geometry assessment. And the Algebra 2 assessment is aligned to content from Algebra 1. This may have impacted results somewhat, in our opinion, depending on the pathway of the student in that they may have been assessed on content that they didn't learn in the prior year. Do you think it's because of my mask? Or should I get closer? Okay, I'll stand closer. I feel like it's making a loud noise. Thank you. So As an example, students in Algebra 2 typically are not in Algebra 1 the year before. They're usually in geometry the year before, but that Algebra 2 assessment was assessing Algebra 1 content. In science, the assessments were aligned to grade bands of content. So for example, students in grade 12 were assessed on the science content covered in grades, all through grades 9, 10, and 11. This slide shows the number of students who took each assessment and the percentage of students within the grade level or course who had a valid test. You'll notice that we are close to 100% participation in each assessment, and this in fact is in line with the state results for participation as well. You will notice, in particular, science grade 12 had the lowest participation at 79%. Otherwise, we're near 100%. The assessment was scored using this scale, 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. Level 3 is the highest score, and it means that less support is needed. 2 means some support may be needed, and 1 means that strong support may be needed. The levels and the scores of the levels were determined by the number of questions the student got correct on the test. So we looked at the test across all the grade levels and averaged the number of questions on each test. In average, in ELA, there were 10 two-part questions. In math, there were 24 questions, and in science, there were on average 25 questions. This chart shows the district-level performance on the Start Strong diagnostic assessment in each of the grade levels and courses for mathematics. The different columns represent the percentages of students who achieved at each performance level, with the green columns representing the state percentage performance. As an example, in grade 6, 12.1% of the Berners Township students were reported as a level 1, or in need of strong support, compared to the state's 53.7%. Whereas level 2 in Berners Township was reported at 25.6, needing some support, compared to the state's 24.3%, and 62.4% of Berners Township reported as level 3, less support may be needed, compared to the state's 22.1%. So with the exception of Algebra 1 and grade 8, the percentage of students who were reported as needing less support, or level 3, was greater than the percentage of students who were reported as needing strong or some support combined. This really shows, in our opinion, the resilience of our students and the monumental lift our dedicated staff made last year to propel our students' knowledge forward in meaningful ways. Other notable highlights include our middle school geometry students, all reported at level 3, 100%, as well as our high reported Algebra 2 performance at the high school. We're keeping an eye on the 8th grade performance, as this group has traditionally scored lower in previous state level assessments. For Algebra 1, we are evaluating how the test design may have impacted these results. As I said, the test given to Algebra 1 students assess the grade 8 student learning standards. Since our Algebra 1 curriculum is a 1-year accelerated course, it teaches both Algebra 1 and grade 8 standards related to algebra. Students were exposed to content questions that they have not yet been taught, but will be learning throughout the school year. As such, the performance on this assessment may not be indicative of the content students were directly taught last year. This slide displays the overall results by support level for both the district and the state in ELA. Overall, we see the same trend of strong performance. In all grade levels, our district had a higher percentage of students identified as needing less support when compared to the state, and a lower percentage of students identified as needing strong support. Further, we see a general trend of increasing strength as we progress up the grade levels. Increasing percentage of students needing less support and declining percentage of students needing strong support. Grade 4 and 6 do have the lowest percentage of students at the highest level. However, both are still well above the state average and are a majority of the students. The decline from 5th to 6th grade is also seen at the state level. So those are our areas of focus. This chart shows the science results. In science, the standard spiral. Common themes with earth science, life science, and physical science are introduced and then built upon. So they're introduced in kindergarten through 2nd grade, reinforced through grades 3 and 5, Again, reinforced through 6 and 8, and then mastered in 9 through 12. Sort of important in considering the way they were assessed and what the results show us. Ninth grade, assessing grades 6 through 8 standards. So students in ninth grade took an assessment measuring their content learned in grades 6 through 8. Is the only grade where level 2 was the highest percentage. Grade 6 and 12, level 3 was the highest percentage. In grade 9, simultaneously had the lowest number of lowest percentage of level 1. Our data is still well above the state level. The ninth grade had the lowest percentage of level 3 across the state by far compared to the 6th and 12th grade assessment. The science supervisor said it may be hard to find a cause of these, identify some of the reasons for some of these results, but he feels that for some reason the questions on the ninth grade assessment may have been more challenging than compared to the questions on the 6th and the 12th grade assessments. The next 3 slides are going to include subgroup results for students across the reported subgroups. So you'll notice that subgroups where we have less than 20 students, the data is not reported in order to protect the student's privacy. This is the subgroup results in mathematics. Our demographic areas of relative strength would be the Asian, white, and multiracial subgroups, while male and female students perform similarly across the different levels. Demographic areas of relative weakness include the Hispanic subgroup, English language learners, students with disabilities, and the economically disadvantaged. You'll see similar results here on the ELA subgroup results. Demographic areas of relative strength include the Asian subgroup, white, and multiracial, while both male and female students are well represented at the highest level. And our areas of relative weakness would be in our English language learners and students with disabilities. In science, 56% of students with disabilities falling in the level 1 or strong support may be needed category will be a focal point in the upcoming 612 program evaluation and the K-5 science kit review. Potential goal includes, of that review will include the development of an increased repertoire of differentiated course materials made available to science instructional staff. In the New Jersey Department of Education's presentation that I linked earlier, they report and analyze what they see as trends happening across the state. We feel we see similar trends, right, where learning loss was perhaps greater in mathematics than ELA, where unfinished learning, that's the state's term for the lower results, may be greater in elementary than in older students, and historically underserved student populations, we see gaps persisting. When considering this data, we feel we need to consider several factors that may have impacted student performance. First of all, the return to in-person instruction was a transition for many students. In fact, we delayed testing for several weeks in the fall to allow students more time to focus on that transition first. For our elementary students, this was their first experience with any kind of state standardized testing. Each assessment included only 20 to 25 selected response questions, which means that a relatively small number of questions were covering a proportionately larger amount of standards and is not at all equivalent to the length of annual state assessments. In our analysis, we found that students lost a greater number, this is really typically in ELA. Looking at the results in ELA, some of our students who lost points on questions where they were required to select more than one response and they only selected one. Also in ELA, many students, there were 2-part questions, and if they got one of the parts wrong, they lost points for both parts. So where we saw several students missing questions. So in this way, while those are questions that students do see on standardized test results, as I mentioned, our elementary students haven't seen those questions yet. And certainly it's not demonstrating what they know. So the results were made immediately available to teachers as soon as they came in from the state through the handiwork of Mr. Colmer and Mr. Hunter, providing teachers with access to scores and test item analysis. From there, our teachers have worked in their course or grade level professional learning communities to identify potential areas to focus on, to differentiate, to provide additional instruction or individual support for specific students. Teachers and administrators review the reports for potential trends in specific grade levels or courses, and they will continue to focus on those for the rest of the year. So in addition to the Start Strong assessments, there are two other state assessments I'm going to report out on tonight. The Access for ELLs, for our English language learners, and the DLM, or the Dynamic Learning Maps. So Access for ELLs is what's administered to our English language learners. It's administered in the spring annually to students kindergarten through grade 12 who have been identified as an English language learner in order to monitor their progress in learning English. The results are used to make decisions about their programming needs and to determine when they have become proficient enough in English to no longer require English language learning services. The scores range from entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching. So a 6-point scale, basically. Because our ELL population is fairly small, you can see the size of our program throughout the district. There were 77 total students last year. We have under 20 in grade levels, so I can't report the results to you out by grade, but I can group them by grade band to show you how students performed at each level. So scores ranging anywhere between 4.5 to 6 can be used to make a decision to exit a student from the ELL program. But that score alone isn't the only thing considered. Certainly other factors are considered when making that decision, including how they're doing in their academics and other factors that may come our way. The DLM, or the Dynamic Learning Map, assessment is given to a very small percentage of students with significant learning needs. Eligibility for the DLM is determined through the student's individualized education plan. The DLM is aligned to general learning standards, but the students are not compared to each other. Rather, they are evaluated for meeting their own individualized goals. The number of students taking the assessment also falls below 20 in each grade level, so we are reporting out their progress by subject across all grades. You can see where students in each grade band fall along the 4 levels, from emerging to approaching target, at target, or advanced. Those scores indicate whether the student has met their individual goals for that year. A national assessment administered annually in Berners Township since 2012 is the Nwea Map Assessment. MAP has provided us with a level of consistency in our ability to measure student learning throughout the pandemic. So for this reason, I'm sharing with you a summary of our fall MAP data in addition to the Start Strong results. For those of you who may be less familiar with MAP, our students in grades 2 through 8 take the MAP assessment in reading and mathematics in the fall, winter, and spring across most years. This assessment measures both student growth and achievement. It's primarily used as a diagnostic tool, but in the spring, the assessment is also used as one measure in placement decisions. We use it administratively to review program goals and curriculum as well. MAP is a computer-based assessment that the students take on the computer, obviously, and we feel that also prepares them for state assessments. It's adaptive in nature, so that's different from a state assessment, in that when students take the test, the question difficulty changes based on how they do. So the questions get more difficult if they get them correct, and they get less difficult if the students get them incorrect. The MAP score, or RIT score, tells us where a student is ready to learn relative to the learning standards. And it is independent of grade level. I'll talk about that in a second. So MAP provides our teachers with immediate feedback. They see the scores within 24 hours. And because the students take it across multiple grades, it gives us a measure of growth over time that we can kind of rely on in terms of understanding their progress compared to an assessment like Start Strong, which they've never taken. So students are tested in ELA and math in those content strands. This score, called a RIT score, is an equal interval score that is independent of the student grade level. So a score in second grade here is really the same thing if an 8th grader gets the same score. It measures where the students are ready to learn compared to, aligned to the standards and independent of grade level. These are our MAP scores by grade level for the last 6 years. So each bar represents a grade level, and you'll notice the purple bar on the right, it is our district mean score for the fall of 2021. If you look at the reading scores across the 6-year band, you'll notice that the scores are relatively flat and stable across all 6 years, especially across the last 3 years throughout the pandemic. Math scores vary a little bit more. Our scores this year in grade 3 are slightly lower. They're slightly higher in grades 4, 5, and 6, a little bit lower in grade 7, and lower in grade 8. So there's a little bit more fluctuation in mathematics, which is what we sort of also see in the other assessments. In this chart, we track our mean scores in both subjects across all grades. There's a couple of ways we can look at this information, and I'll draw your attention to 3 separate things. So over here in teal, we see in the left column the district mean score. So for grade 5 in mathematics, it's 221.8, compared to the national mean in the same assessment is 209.1. So we can compare Bernard Township mean scores to national norms. Next, we can look across a particular assessment. So in 3rd grade, the same a different group of students take MAP in 3rd grade. I was going to say the same test, but it's not the same test because it's adaptive in nature. But it's a different group of students taking the assessment every year, and you see when you look at our students' performance on grade 3, going from fall of 2018 to 2019 to 2020 to 2021, it's relatively flat. What we find more meaningful is looking at the data this way, a cohort of students as they progress through the grades. So in grade 5, the district mean score in mathematics is 225. In grade 6, it was 230.4. In grade 7, it was 238.1, and in grade 8, it was 242.6. I forgot to mention in the last slide that the average growth annually for students ranges from 3 to 12 RIT points. So this falls within that range of what's an average growth. The growth tends to be greater in the lower grades and smaller in the upper grades. So our overall analysis of the MAP data, we find that in grades 3 through 5 in both reading and math, our scores have remained stable. In math, our scores in grade 6 increased from last year, but are still slightly lower than average pre-COVID. 7th grade scores are flat with last year, but also slightly lower than pre-COVID. And in 8th grade, we see a slight decrease from prior administrations. Our ELA scores were stable in grades 6 through 8 over the last 6 administrations. In both areas, we observed separately that students are spending a significant amount of time on this assessment, with the notable exception of grade 8 reading, which has decreased. So for the last 2 years, NWE has conducted a study of the national achievement on the MAP assessment to sort of look at what was happening throughout the pandemic. I shared their report last year in this report, and this year I have linked the full report that they did this fall. So the national trends found in their study are similar to what the NJDOE found from the Start Strong results. They report larger relative declines in mathematics than in reading. They found that growth declined across all grades, but that historically marginalized students were disproportionately affected. And also very interesting, they found that higher achieving students' growth gains remained consistent with pre-COVID growth, whereas struggling students lost some of that growth throughout the pandemic. So not particularly surprising to recognize that struggling students fared worse throughout the pandemic than higher achieving students. So any student who took either assessment, the MAP assessment or the Start Strong assessment, can find a PDF report of that assessment in the Genesis parent portal. You would go into the portal, the Documents tab, and you would see a list of anything that's been uploaded into the portal for that child. If something's not there and you think they took it, then I would encourage you to reach out to the school counselor and to sort of see if it should be there and it's not. These are what the reports look like. So the MAP report, loaded up 3 times a year, and the Start Strong report is there since the fall. So in summary, when looking at data from both assessments, we want to focus our efforts going forward on examining students in subgroup populations with disabilities, English language learners, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged. Grade 8 and Algebra 1 at the high school, grade 8 math and Algebra 1 at the high school, warrants further investigation, while 4th and 6th grade ELA performance also warrants further investigation. Some recommendations for interventions going forward would be to continue in our efforts to provide sheltered instruction to teachers in order to support English language learners in their classroom, as well as to target other professional development or learning opportunities for teachers, as well as resources to support literacy mathematics instruction. We will continue to perform items analysis in the standards at the grade level in order to consider grade level adjustments and areas of focus within the curriculum and to work specifically with students in need of additional support. So that was a lot of information. I'll take questions from the board in a minute, but I want to kind of finish with going over the spring assessment calendar and some important information I want to highlight for you. This is linked to the state assessment calendar for Berners Township on the curriculum page of the website, and it has all of the assessment dates for all of the assessments all year long. The NJGPA, hopefully you've heard of it, the New Jersey Department of Education announced a high school graduation assessment this fall that will be required for graduation, replacing, well, we haven't had a high school graduation proficiency assessment that was a one test for many years. Going back, you might remember the HESPA. Instead, we've had in its place a math assessment and an ELA assessment. So starting with the current juniors, the graduation assessment requirement will now be an assessment that they take in their junior year in both ELA and mathematics over a period of 4 days. So they announced this requirement in the fall. The current juniors will be taking the assessment the week of March 18th. And in fact, the juniors are required to take the assessment, although this year's juniors are not required to pass it in order to graduate, but they must take it in order to be able to use one of the other alternative pathways to meet the state graduation assessment requirement. Starting with the current sophomores, the state has just passed a proficiency score, like a cut score that will be required to pass the test in order to graduate from high school. And that was set at a 750. But for this year, that passing score is not required, but it is required for students, current juniors, to actually take the assessment in March over that 1 or 2 week period to be able to use one of the other pathways. It's really important information. Linked here is the release from the Department of Education announcing that from October. And I also linked their release of the proficiency cut score. A little less complicated is the NJSLA, right? So the NJSLA for spring 2020 will be administered. The window is from April 27th to May 25th across all grades in Berners Township, grades 3 through 9, and then some other additional students in mathematics in the upper grades. So you can find that calendar, the window of test dates, on the calendar posted on the district website. Here are some parent resources provided by the State Department of Education, the PTA organization, and Understanding the Score for anybody interested in learning a little bit more about the assessment or how students might prepare. And that's it. Thank you.
In terms of the graduation exam for juniors, because this is new, this notion of you have to take it, you don't have to pass it, as opposed to you don't have to take it no matter what. Is this, I'm assuming with the juniors coming up upon their scheduling, counselors will be making this very, very clear, but sometimes that information doesn't always get brought home to parents. And I don't want any kid to fall in the boat where, for whatever reason, they're visiting a college, they think they don't have to be there, to miss this window. It probably has already been shared, but will you be sharing, just this, like, just to the juniors parent,
Yes,
the
we
fam?
will.
Okay.
We've sent it out a couple times, and we still know a lot of people are not aware of it, so we will keep sending it out. And the counselors will be mentioning in the meetings, yes. Yeah. We're going to do everything we can to communicate it over and over and over again. I will clarify slightly, there will be an administration that we can administer in the summer and again in the fall for students who don't pass it. I'm less clear on what the rules are going to be around giving it to students who just didn't come and take it. That's, we don't have a lot of specific guidance yet, but there is a summer and a fall administration for students who don't pass the assessment that might also be available to those students, but I wouldn't really bank on it. Mrs. Gray?
I don't really have a question. I just want to say thank you. It was really nice to have an in-person presentation, and I hope we can have more. We really appreciate the time that you put into this.
There's one in 3 weeks.
All right, so little coming attractions. But thank you.
You're welcome.
So this Start Strong test, is there like a Finish Strong test? What are we comparing this to?
Wouldn't that be the NJSLA? I don't know.
Right, so like, is there something that's going to map these scores back to the NJSLA for the fall that we can, or the spring?
So they did use released questions from NJSLA assessments. So they were questions from previous administrations of the NJSLA, but like a subset, like I said, linked to certain standards. No, I don't believe there's any connection that will ever be made. They're not projecting proficiency based on the scores. It was intended to let teachers in schools take a look and see who might need some extra support in certain areas that they felt were, really important to focus on.
But then to quantify that we had any progress, we have to go back to MAP, NJSLA, our internal metrics.
Well, we will have NJSLA in the spring. So the students will take the assessment for their current grade level this spring, and we will get those results sometime, in the summer. And that I would report out on in the fall.
Right,
So
okay.
that
But
would
we're
really-
going back to NJSLA
Going
and MAP,
back to that with
and that's how we're tracking
measures-
progress, so we're not
Correct.
getting something like this in the spring to see if we
I don't
caught
think-
everybody up.
I don't think we'll ever have Start Strong again, but don't quote me.
And then, yeah, and then MAP, so scores are stable, but it took more time for the kids to get there. So what's your view on that component of it? Or has NWEA said anything about that in terms of like kids across the country taking more time?
I didn't actually see in their report that they saw that across the board. That was in our data, where we
Oh, okay.
can get a report of how long students are spending on the assessment. Certainly much longer on the math assessment, and we feel that's probably because there is a connection to placement in advanced mathematics at the end of the year. There's a little bit more sort of pressure associated with that assessment, even though in the fall, we don't use that score. And in reading, so it was longer, but not as long as in math, so it could be readjusting to school. I couldn't tell you why. And again, like in 8th grade, we've seen over several years students spending less time on the assessment as they're leaving 8th grade and going into the high school. There's maybe less of a need to do well on that assessment. It's not
Right.
tied to any placements anymore.
Yep.
That's my best guess.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of our teachers because, considering how much across the country kids fell behind during COVID, the fact that our scores on a test that we know actually is meaningful, like MAP, where we have data over time, the fact that they're, pretty stable is pretty significant. And considering that the kids had just gone back to school, were taking these tests and they were wearing their masks and all that, the fact that they
Right.
were able to perform as well as they did, obviously is a credit to our teachers. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, we agree. That's it. Thank you very much. See you in 3 weeks.
Okay, now we're up to Superintendent's report. There are 2 items. Would someone like to make a motion for those? Ms. Singh and Mrs. White. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of people missing, or, oh, I didn't realize Rod was missing. Okay. Sorry, Rod, I didn't look over that way. So for Superintendent's report, Ms. Singh and Mrs. White seconded the motion for the 2 items. Mr. Markarian?
Sure. So the first item is the establishment of the board committee assignments, since we had our reorganization meeting in January and appointed 2 new board members at the last Board of Ed meeting. We had a full complement of 9 board members that have been assigned to the different committees, as well as some of the liaison roles. And the second item is just the HIB report.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Markarian? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. Hira. Okay. Mrs. McCune,
She's coming.
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we're up to public comment on agenda items. If you have a comment on something that's on the agenda tonight, please come up and please state your name and address when you speak, and then you can write your name and address on the clipboard. Thank you. There's nobody here in person that wants to make a public comment on agenda items. Ms. Fox, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We can see them, right? They're just, right. She's trying to connect. Yeah. Okay, Motley, are you in the meeting? Looks like you've connected. You're in the meeting if you'd like to make public comment. Hello? Kay Motley? That's the last one. The other ones aren't connected. Joseph Griffith is connected. Joseph Griffith?
If you unmute, you can make public comment, Mr. Griffith. They're all in except for. Right. Nobody has their camera on. Nope. Jazz Vinder, you are in the meeting if you'd like to make public comment. Two of the other people left.
Okay, sorry for the delay. We're trying out this Zoom public comment, which worked last meeting. So if anyone at home was trying to get in and they actually heard Ms. Fox trying to get them into the Zoom and it wasn't working for them, they should contact us and let us know what happened. My guess is that some people might have logged into the waiting room and then they weren't paying attention when it was time and they didn't, realize that she was trying to let them in. But please, if you know of someone that tried to do it unsuccessfully, let us know and we'll see if we can figure out what happened. My guess is that they just weren't there when she went back to them. So at this point, we'll close public comment on agenda items. We are up to approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion for item 1? Mr. Salmon and Ms. Light seconded. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we vote? No. Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune, Madam President.
Thank you. We're up to the Finance Committee. There are 4 items. The last one is on an addendum. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. White and Mrs. Gray. Mr. Salmon, it was still you for this month's meeting, right, that we had, but you already reported out, right?
Yes.
Okay,
And
it's
no
getting-
report.
Okay. So for the 4 items, I'd just like to draw your attention to the last item, which was item 4, which is a generous donation from the Ridge High School PTO that's going to be used for a presentation to the students on the next upcoming Wellness Day, which I'm sure will get reported out on in our Wellness Committee report when we have that. So thank you to the Ridge PTO. And I think at this point, does anyone have any questions on the other items? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Okay, we're up to the Personnel Committee. There's 20 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Ms. Schaefer and Ms. Singh. There's not a Personnel Committee report either.
No report.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we vote? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Ms. Singh,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Ms. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Khan,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. We're up to the Policy Committee, which I believe just met today, right?
Yes, the policy committee met today, so I will have the minutes ready by next week.
Okay.
I'll report out the next meeting.
And then the Curriculum Committee, I think, is meeting, right, this Friday?
Yes. No, we just met. We just met. We met on Friday.
And I was
I'll be-
there. This is really bad.
We
I
just
was
met
really
on,
there. I really was. And I
we
was
met on
paying
Friday, and
attention.
I'll be reporting out at the next meeting.
Too many meetings to keep track of. Okay, I was there. Wellness Committee?
Wellness is meeting next week, February 17th.
Okay, thank you. And then Liaison Committee reports, does anyone have any?
The SESC, Somerset County Ed Services Commission Board meeting was last Wednesday, but there was nothing of note to report out.
I just want to share that the Municipal Alliance, my first meeting anyway, is tomorrow evening, and just bear with me for 1 second. I do have one, there's a Narcan training coming up, and I do have the date. I swore I was going to have it in front of me, and I do not. So if I find it before the end of the meeting, I'll give it in board forum, okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're up to public comment on non-agenda items. If anyone has public comment, please come down and tell us your name and address, and then write it on the clipboard, please, too. Thank you.
While she's writing, can I just say that it's February 15th at 7 p.m.
Do I speak here? Is the mic on? Okay. My name is Lauren Zugale. I live at 28 Meadowview Road here in Basking Ridge. I want to say thank you, first of all, for eliminating the requirement of parents having to take their children for medical clearance to return to gym. However, the cancellation of this practice, while appreciated, is almost confirmation to me that this procedure should have never existed. This was never a recommendation or a requirement from the New Jersey Department of Health for schools. In addition, it put families like mine in unnecessary, stressful situations. Not to mention, I can't imagine the waste of time of district staff and healthcare professionals. Just to put into context for the Board of Education and the audience here and listening at home, when I was not able to arrange for my own children to get doctor's notes for them to return to gym well past their 10-day quarantine after having COVID, I was told by the nursing coordinator to go to urgent care with my children for a non-urgent situation. Ironically, again, just for context, it was okay for my children to participate in a 3-town wrestling tournament in this building, my daughter to sing and dance for the WAM's school play after school, for her to participate in 2 different choral groups after school, and to play basketball in the school building. But it was not okay for them to return to a state-mandated course, PE. And they were separated and excluded because I couldn't get them a doctor's appointment because their doctor wasn't available after school hours. And I didn't want to pull them from school anymore since they had already missed tons of school from being sick. That being said, I already emailed questions to the Board of Education and the superintendent a few weeks ago. I did receive a response from Mr. McCarrion, and I appreciate that. But I did not receive answers to the questions that I still have. Number 1, what is the process for developing school district procedures that are not included or recommended by the Department of Health? Who stamps approval for decisions that are outside of the recommendations by the Department of Health for schools? Number 3, is consistency of implementation a priority of the district on school grounds before, during, and after school? And if so, why are the rules different depending on the day of the week and the time of the day, even with the same group of students? And finally, what is the expectation for a resident regarding a response to an email to the Board of Education? I'm hopeful that the Board of Education and the superintendent will be able to answer my questions and to review current practices to be sure that they are in the best interest of the students and the community. I'm done. Thank you.
My name is Cody Smith. I live at 36 Royal Oak Drive. The comments that I'd like to give maybe were more appropriate a couple of weeks ago when the board appointed 2 new members, but I had a commitment. I did watch it on YouTube or from the lead. I think there were a lot of qualified candidates, but my question really evolves around Ms. Singh losing the election and then getting appointed to the board. So Mr. Perry did a good job of summarizing this in the Bernardsville News and went through some of the history here. And while I would agree that there should not be a moratorium on anybody who losing elections should not consider coming back and trying to be on the board, I don't think we need a one-size-fits-all on this. The question here is really the timing of all this. So as he said, in October 8th, there was a case where someone had lost the election 6 months earlier. There were 5 candidates. They lost the election by a mere 22 votes, and that person did not get appointed to the board. In June of 2012, 1 year after the election, there were 2 candidates. The person who lost by 2 votes, and in that case, they did get appointed to the board. In January of 2022, 2 months after the election, there were 13 candidates. If we take out Mr. Byrd, who also didn't get elected and tried to get appointed to the board, Ms. Singh lost by 1,059 votes. She got 2,716 votes. The next person, Ms. Light, got 3,775 votes. So by my math, she lost by over 1,000 votes. So I thought when I watched this, I was quite surprised that Ms. Singh or Mr. Byrd would even try to get on the board in this short period of time. But again, that's their decision. But what I was even more surprised about is that this board appointed them. As you recall in the election, I refer to it as the incumbent cabal. 4 of the incumbents ran together. Ms. Singh lost. And then we see the 3 members of the cabal vote to put her back on the board. As she said, there were plenty of qualified candidates that night. They were very impressive, and they came from a wide range of background. And I personally don't see how a Harvard-educated wellness coach had the qualifications to overcome the negating the votes that the voters chose just 2 months earlier, and it wasn't even close. So I think you ought to consider whether if this happens again, not a one-size-fits-all, but we ought to be told why it is that her qualifications far exceeded those other, if we take out Mr. Byrd, 11 people that tried that night. And in the short time after the election, the wide margin of defeat, it doesn't make any sense to me on what's going on here. And I think it reflects on this board that there is some kind of cabal and something going on for them to do that. So, and with that, I can't hear you. Oh, and I'm done. Thank you very much.
Hi there. My name is Andrea Lardiere, 119 Dykeman Place. I'm here on behalf of the Ridge softball team. First, I want to thank Mrs. McCune for her response to our earlier email and advising us that the Finance Committee will be discussing the athletic fields at the committee meeting on February 24th. We look forward to hearing your report on that discussion. However, I'd still like to address the board on this issue so that when the Finance Committee meets, they have the full picture. I'm the proud parent of a Ridge High School softball player. We have an enthusiastic, talented group of athletes who are anxiously awaiting the spring so that they may play the sport that they love. As we embark on this new season, I feel compelled to bring a significant safety issue to light. As you know, the varsity field is located below all the other fields at the high school. And as a result, whenever it rains, the water streams down from above, which causes pooling in the left field. Since the additions, parking lots, and turf field were built at Ridge, the water runoff has increased further. This has been a problem for years. Softball players have been known to have their cleats get stuck in the mud. They trip and fall. They've actually lost a cleat while they've been running. We've advised Mr. Shello of this condition, and he's well aware of it from years past. In fact, he told us that in 2019, a large part of the games had to be played at Diamond Nation in Flemington because the varsity field was not playable. He has advised us that the district has looked into drainage work, but it has not been put into motion due to the costs of substantial engineering and construction work. He has expressed his frustration with us, but says that the costs are prohibitive. However, there were added costs of renting Diamond Nation and busing the team to the fields on those days, so if Bernards Township invests the money into remediating our field, the weather would not be an issue. Mr. Shello also advised that the ground staff did recently do some work on the drainage swale that runs along the third base foul line outside the playing field fence. However, upon my recent visit to the field, after a day of even light rain, it was clear that the field is still puddling and extremely unsafe. Do we have to wait until a player breaks a leg or tears an ACL to play until changes are made? Would you want your children to play on a field that's unsafe? It is concerning that the costs are preventing the much-needed work on this field. This is not only an aesthetics issue, but an important safety issue. I'm coming to you as a parent of an athlete, but also a mom who's extremely concerned about the safety of our Ridge players as well as our visiting players. I am bringing this to your attention now before anybody else gets hurt. Ridge High School must invest in the safety of all of its athletes, not just the teams with the biggest media exposure. And speaking of aesthetics, a visit to the varsity field reveals some significant inequalities between Ridge baseball and Ridge softball. One glaring difference is the existence of dugouts at the baseball field, while the softball team has an uncovered bench. While the baseball players are safe, warm, and dry in inclement weather, the softball players are forced to sit in the wind, rain, and cold and are still asked to perform at a high level. Okay. We have very generous parents and grandparents and sponsors willing to invest in these dugouts. If they're feasible, we hope that they are, so that our girls can feel the same respect as the boys do at the baseball field. We would like our girls to be proud to play on the varsity softball field, and we would really ask for the board to invest in our softball team to address the safety issues with the field and correct the inequalities between the two teams, so that our girls will know that Ridge High School supports the softball team as much as the other the other teams. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else here for public comment?
My name is Kate Raffanello. I live at 23 Lancelot Lane. Good evening, Board. Thank you to the Board of Education for this opportunity to share our feedback in this platform. There is a group of us here today, as you heard, to make you aware of a very important safety issue with the Ridge Girls Varsity High School softball team. The girls navigate this safety hazard every single time they set foot on their very own field. The issue is related to the poor field conditions. This is directly due to poor drainage, which is a result of other construction projects like the football and lacrosse fields. Proper water drainage was not addressed, and instead it just all falls into the girls' softball fields, creating a very negligent situation. We have witnessed players, as Andrea said, literally losing their shoes and still expected to play. And this is both our girls and the opposing teams. The water hazard is present even on non-inclement weather days. It could be days after the rain has come. We raise this concern because both parents and young ladies playing the game have expressed concern. It is very possible to tear an ACL, to twist an ankle in these conditions. This could result in experience-ending injuries, which are clearly aware of what can happen. While I'm not a drainage expert, my simple observations deems this to be completely preventable with proper drainage. I've followed the proper chain of command. I've shared this youth hazard with the athletic department. My purpose of speaking to you today is to make you aware of this safety issue and ask for your help. When there is a safety concern at our schools, I've always been comforted to know that the town would address blind spots when made aware of them. As I mentioned, we are all aware. This is a negligent hazard. Thank you for your time and your support for our girls. We are so proud of how hard they work at school and on the field to compete. Our girls, thank you, and us parents, thank you.
Dear Mr. Markarian and members of the board, my name is Nicole Riley and I live at 35 Tall Timber Lane. I first want to thank you for making masks optional and allowing each family to choose what's best for their own families. I respect anyone who chooses to continue to wear a mask, and I know my children will do the same. I texted my 8th grade daughter the news. After a smiley face and many, many celebration emojis, she said, "Can I go back to the cafeteria with my friends?" I know you are aware that strict lunch break at WAMS isn't giving the students a true break to recharge for the afternoon classes. It's unfair compared to the recess and lunch that our elementary students enjoy, and far from the process our high schoolers are experiencing. The current 8th grade students have not had lunch with friends since March of 2020. With the mask mandate being lifted on 3/7, have you determined the next steps, how you will move forward with WAMS lunch? At this point, we owe it to the middle school students to find a solution for their lunch break. Thank you.
Cindy Wong, 22 Carriage Way. Good evening, Mr. Markarian, Ms. McCune, and the board. Thank you for proactively sharing some of the conversations happening behind the scenes with the recent state update and communicating the plan to make masks optional once the mandate is lifted. Thank you for showing the leadership many of us had hoped for each time we came to this mic asking to push back on the mandates. In addition to the everyday business as usual challenges you all face, I, as a new parent, having a child in school, I also appreciate the timely communication about school openings and weather-related impacts, and appreciate your continued dedication to all these matters that affect this district. Many of this panel of returning board members here in the last year have publicly stressed the responsibility to the global community as hesitation to push back on the governor's mandates. We now see that countries around the world now are going back to normal with no mandates, without segregation or discrimination of any sort. The policies across our own nation also vary state by state and locally with different effect. I hope today's response from the board is also a realization that the global community does not care about our children or our health or our wellness, and it should not be relegated to a mandate. And we should hopefully keep this in mind when considering any future policy to divide this community further at the cost of our children. Thank you for recognizing that health and wellness does not have a one-size-fits-all definition and should not be relegated to a one-size-fits-all solution. Our individual maintenance of health and wellness is of our own. For those of you who truly believe in health and wellness, I hope today's response is also recognition that enough is enough, and the cost to children's mental and physical wellness is getting too high, and we all need to get back to deciding for ourselves and holding ourselves accountable for our own health decisions now and for the future. I hope you will continue this mindset as the metrics and science will continue to ever be changing. Thank you for recognizing the end game should always be about the children and using this opportunity to serve the needs of the children, the parents of this community who want choice, not further serving the state or the unions or any of the political agendas that have put our children on the front line in receiving the consequences of our decisions. Although the following extra 30-day requirements dictated by unknown factors is out of control, we truly do hope the mandate is lifted next month, as the governor mentioned today. So thank you again for Mr. Markarian and this board for the prompt consideration to amend to more sensible policy to make mass optional next month. Thank you all for your continued service to our children. Thanks.
Is there anyone else here in person for public comment? Okay, do we have anyone in the Zoom room? Okay.
Kay Motley, would you like to make public comment? Corey Bott, you're in the meeting. If you can unmute, you can make public comment as well. Do you? Yeah, I am. Sorry. Corey Bott, would you like to make public comment?
No, I'm just here to hear what was being said.
Okay, thank you. Kay Motley, would you like to make public comment? The other person said they were just listening.
Okay, so for people at home, if you're just listening to the meeting, you don't need to go into the Zoom waiting room. You can just watch the live stream. So I think that's where some of the confusion is. Some people logged into the Zoom link. So maybe we can look at on the website where the link is, again, trying to make it more explicit, you know, that if you just want to listen to the meeting, you know what I mean? That's not where you click, because that seems to have happened. Okay, so we'll try to clarify that. So at this point, I'm going to close public comment on non-agenda items. Okay, so Mr. Markarian would like to respond to a couple of the items.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. It was nice that we had some good news in the media today. That was, I think, welcome and encouraging for everybody, and seeing these COVID numbers going down is really great, so that's uplifting for everyone. Just with respect to some of the public comment tonight, I know that we have had an incredible effort going on by all of the nursing team for almost 2 years now, including our director of school nursing, who, I mean, honestly, I can't say enough about, between the amount of time that I spent on the phone with Ms. Zarabera between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday. So I really appreciate her support and all that she's done for the district. I imagine if she referred anybody to urgent care, she was probably just trying to help somebody find a doctor to comply with the policy that we had in place. And truthfully, the challenge of trying to keep up with changing requirements on an almost monthly basis has been something I think the nurses have done a great job. Obviously, nothing's ever perfect, and we're always looking to try to make things work better for people, and I think that's what we talked about tonight. Relative to the softball field, thanks for your comments about that. I think as Ms. McKeon had emailed some folks tonight, I know we're going to talk about this at the Finance Committee at the end of the month. I think it was the 24th. I know that over the years, the drainage problem behind the high school has been persistent. We have sought to do maintenance on all the fields. It is difficult to keep up with the water. I've seen us put down infield mix and get fields looking good one day, and a week or two later, I'm seeing like a rut of where water has washed away the work that we've done. So it is an ongoing problem, and hopefully we can come up with some plans that will help resolve it in the long run. As far as investment is concerned, I know that we did make a major investment on the softball field several years ago, regrading, redoing the infield. I think we put up new fencing and new backstop. I think at the varsity field, if I'm not mistaken, there was a donation done for the dugouts there. So it sounds like some people are interested in making some contributions. Maybe we can work something out. Cafeteria issue at the middle school, I did meet with Mrs. Hudak. We had some conversations about that, and I know that she's open to trying to do some things to create more opportunity for the kids to be together. I think this announcement that came today, will help her feel a little bit more comfortable. We talked about some ideas that I thought might make sense around the time that we have this mask mandate lifted, so I know she's working on some ideas that would allow the kids to get together in larger groups. The cafeteria challenge is a little bit different from one building to the next. Obviously, the elementary schools are smaller, and they do spread out their lunches over a longer period of time. The high school is using both gyms and other areas as well as the cafeteria to spread students out. The middle school is a little bit more confined. They have a third of the students each eating in a relatively compact period of time, and they're not able to use the gyms because unlike Ridge, where you have a unit lunch and all the spaces are available, at Annan, when 1/3 of the kids have lunch, the other 2/3 of the kids are in the gyms, in the classroom. So it's a little more restrictive there in what she's able to do. And then we'll try to do something with the website to make it a little clearer about what's the Zoom link for public comment and what is the link just to watch the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we're up to Board Forum. Does anyone have anything for Board Forum? Mr. Salmon?
So I just want to address the comment that was a personal attack on Ms. Singh, because the speaker started with I guess, apparently disingenuous attempt to say he wasn't casting aspersions on people that want to that happen to lose an election and come back out and run again. I can't understand for the life of me why you would try and dissuade somebody that wants to help the kids and volunteer her time to help the kids in this town. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So the fact that she was on the board and lost an election and then came back, I think should be commended. Yeah, fine, you're also super smart. So then,
Can you guys stop, please? Thank you.
So then the cabal, that's the fun part. So then the 3-member cabal, that's a minority position on the board, conspired to appoint Ms. Singh. That makes no sense whatsoever. So I just think if you're going to personally attack somebody that you've never even met, that you don't know, that you've never corresponded with, for coming out and volunteering her time to serve the children of this town is totally ridiculous.
Excuse me. This isn't a back and forth. Okay, we're having a meeting up here. So does anyone else have anything for
I would like to just say, I know many of you out there, and it makes me sad to see your behavior. If these were kids, you would not applaud somebody speaking about another child that way. And I don't want to hear you yelling out from it's not your time to talk. It's not. It's not your time to speak. It's your time to listen. We listen to you. Now you listen to us. This is somebody who has come out like any other appointment. I've been on this board for a number of years, and I can count 1, 2, 3 people who started here for an appointment. The board has the right to make the determination about who they would like to appoint. You may not always agree with it, but that's the facts.
Just before they leave in cowardly fashion, I'd just like to add, the community voted for 1,746 votes for Ms. Singh. That's 1,746 than the other appointees or potential appointees who did not choose to run. It's not a contest. It's not about what the voters said in November. That's why an appointment position works the way that it does. It's not a 3-year appointment. It's for the balance of the term. I think it was really inconsiderate for the speaker to choose to do that in that manner, and anyone who is appointed deserves to be treated with respect. And I'd also like to add something else that is unrelated. 2 things. One, I want to make a correction. The Community and Crisis Narcan training is at 11 a.m. on the 15th, and I just wanted to say something about the softball field. This is a historical issue. I've been on the Finance Committee for a number of years over the time on my time on the board, and my recollection, and maybe Mr. McLaughlin could refresh it if I'm inaccurate, it was over $1 million, as I recall, to fix the problem. Yeah, okay, so 10 years ago, the cost of fixing the softball field was over $1 million. That's a very daunting project, and no doubt there are safety issues. I have good friends whose kids have played on the softball team, and I have seen and heard exactly the descriptions that you described when you spoke at public comment. We certainly need to get creative to try to get some solutions in place to make it safe, but there are no simple fixes, unfortunately, and as I understood it, it was the varsity soccer field that the drainage was causing the issue, not the soccer on the lacrosse and football field up at Lee Field, but perhaps they are tied together. And then I wanted to reiterate what Mr. Markarian had said about, is it the Diamond Club that made the donations to put the nice dugouts down on the baseball field? Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. White?
I just would like to add, thank you for sitting and having to put up with that. But I also wanted to say, we need to remember our children go to school together. We're parents together. We may not agree. A lot of things we won't agree about. But ultimately, we're parents whose children are in a community together, and we need to set a better role model than what was displayed tonight. I mean, I would be embarrassed if any of my kids were at home watching something like this and watching the clapping and watching the storming out. Again, it's okay to have different points of view. It's okay not to like how the results turned out. Maybe it's not what you wanted. But it's not okay to come up and make statements like that, and to clap against your fellow community member. It's a fellow parent. I mean, I don't know what's going on in this community where people think that it's okay to behave that way. It's not. It's just not. And quite frankly, who would want to come out to sit on the Board of Education and devote hours and hours of time to the job knowing that that's how you are going to be treated? And to those of you who are always respectful and always, come up and you may again have a question or a concern, and you voice it appropriately, or you email us and you ask us the questions, and you have valid concerns or questions or worries or fears, but you do it in an appropriate way. Thank you. I hope more people will pay attention to how you do that.
Thank you for saying that, and to the others of you who spoke. I just want to thank all the board members sitting up here for serving on the board, and it has been a rough couple years during COVID, but I have to say, the way the community is behaving and the divisions in our community really scare me. And like Mrs. White just said, I really hope we can come together and recognize that all of us sitting up here are doing this for the children because we care about them. And if people think that we're doing it for some other reason, that makes me very sad, because I know that that's why all the people on the board came out. And the same thing goes for the people that work in our district. They went into the field of education because they care about children and they're passionate about teaching and supporting children in whatever way they do in their jobs, whether it's the school nurses or the counselors or the support staff and everyone. So I really hope that people can come together and start supporting each other. We are coming out of this 2 years of a pandemic. The kids, luckily, are not as behind in school as they could have been mistaken based on what we saw in the testing report, but they have, suffered during this time, and we need to be focused on them, and all of this nonsense with the adults has got to stop. That's all I have to say. Does anyone else have anything? Okay, we're up to adjournment. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. White and Ms. Singh. Thank you. Oh, all in favor?